The Big Ten schedule, though, I got 3 winners and 3 losers from this thing as well. The more we've been combing through this as we do our due diligence in the spring, the more I realize Wisconsin got the shaft in the Big Ten this year. I mean, substantially more than whoever the next biggest loser is. We've got our own internal grading here. Our strength of schedule model has Wisconsin at a 103. To give you an idea of how that compares, the next closest team is a 91, and then an 88, 87, and so on and so forth. So Wisconsin, by a wide margin, I think, got the toughest draw in the Big Ten. On top of the league schedule, they play at Alabama this year. They got that return trip. But listen to this. There's a 4-week stretch on Wisconsin's schedule where they go at Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, at Oregon. They play Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, 2 of them on the road in a span of 4 weeks, and then the other team you just have thrown in there as filler is perennially one of the most physical teams and toughest defenses to play in the league. They play 8 of the top 10 teams in the Big Ten odds in conference play this year. So, again, you load up your conference with 14, 16, 18 teams. This is what ends up happening. USC, I think, is a loser, at least on the schedule strength front. You'll learn this about USC. They play UCLA every year, obviously. So the years where they play UCLA at home, that's going to account for one of their Big Ten games. And because that game's at home, whereas otherwise, obviously, it would have been on the road. Like you want the UCLA game to be one of your road games, because then that guarantees you got fewer other road games on the schedule. But this year, because they play UCLA at home, they got like 4 other conference road games, plus they go to Notre Dame this year. So USC is going to Purdue. That's 2,000 plus miles. Illinois, 2,000 plus miles. Notre Dame, ditto. At Nebraska, ditto. At Oregon is a relatively shorter road trip. It's still like 1,000 miles up the coast. So they play 3 Tier 1 opponents. They are a hot start candidate, or an HSC, as we call it. Missouri State to open. Been looking forward to that matchup. USC has ducked Missouri State for a long time, and they finally sacked up, and so we're going to get Missouri State against USC, and then Georgia Southern, and then Purdue, and then Michigan State. So got a chance to get the snowball rolling down the hill here. There are also 2 5-game stretches. And you might think to yourself, why is that a big deal? Well, it's a 2-bye-week season. So think about just randomly throwing bye weeks anywhere on a schedule. You only play 12 games. To have 2 stretches of 5 games with no bye weeks, kind of tough. But the reason is because they've got a bye, game, bye in the middle of their schedule, and then you got 5-game stretches on either side. Ohio State. Hey, quick timeout. Check and see if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you're not, I humbly ask that you click subscribe. It's free. It doesn't sign you up for anything. What it does is it helps us keep this show free so we can just do college football year-round. All right, back to the clip. I got them as one of the losers here, too, in the strength of schedule debate. Texas plays in Columbus week 1. We were already getting questions as early as February. The questions are already pouring in. Hey, what game are you going to week 1? First off, we have to name the tour before we decide where we're going to go. Priorities. There is a process around here. We could be at that game. I mean, it would make perfect sense for us to be at that game. They play, Ohio State being they play 3 road games in 4 weeks. Notice Colin's showing you, so they go at Washington, and then that's a West Coast. That's the only West Coast game I think they play all year. Yeah. Then they come home from Minnesota, and then they got at Illinois, at Wisconsin. So that's a 3 road stretch, 4 weeks, never easy, NFL, college, whatever. They play Penn State, Oregon, and, well, actually, they play Michigan. They play Penn State. They don't play Oregon. But those are the other sort of top names in the Big Ten. Penn State, Oregon, and Michigan all have easier draws than Ohio State. That's why I think they're sort of a quasi-loser on the scheduling format. Now, as for winners, Illinois, man. Like, this is Illinois' year. Illinois, they only draw 1 of the 4 Tier 1 teams in the Big Ten. They only play 1 of them. They've got 5 of the bottom 7 teams in the Big Ten odds on their schedule. There is no back-to-back road stretch on their entire schedule. They're very experienced. They're one of the most experienced teams in the country, so keep that in mind. They finished last year very well. At Washington is like theoretically tough because you're from Illinois, so you're going to Seattle to play. But this is a big deal. There's a massive schedule advantage in favor of Illinois there. Illinois is coming off a bye. That's Washington's 6th game in a row, and Washington will be coming off a game at Michigan. So, if you ever had to fly to Seattle to play a game, you want to do it after you're rested and after they're playing their 6th game in a row and they just came back from Ann Arbor. What about Nebraska? No true road game for Nebraska until week 7. They got a neutral site game against Cincinnati, I think. Elsewhere, they don't go on the road until the 11th against Maryland, October 11th. I mean, it's Maryland, Minnesota, 2 weeks in a row. So they got USC at home this year. They got a road game at Penn State. The game at Penn State's the toughest one, at least in terms of road games. You got to be careful with this UCLA game, though. So same thing I just talked about. You got to pay attention to this stuff. Nebraska goes to UCLA on November 8th. UCLA's off a bye. That is Nebraska's 6th consecutive game, and it is their longest road trip of the year. So just something to think about there. And Michigan, I got Michigan as a winner. Let's pay attention to this. There's no Oregon on this schedule. There's no Penn State. There's no Indiana. They play Ohio State at the end of the year. Who cares? They beat Ohio State every year now. It's just kind of tradition around there. There's good optics potential in week 2. So week 2 is a very interesting game. So at Oklahoma, week 2, Oklahoma was very bad last year. There's internal optimism in Norman. They'll be much improved. We'll talk about that later in the show. Let's say that's not the case, though. It's still Oklahoma. It's still a road trip, week 2 in the SEC. So if you go get that, it's really, really good from an optics potential standpoint. You got a new quarterback, a new offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, so maybe they're still figuring things out. Northwestern and Maryland. Those are the 2 teams they play before the Ohio State game. Now, they're both on the road, but it's a good setup. Michigan's got a much better draw, I think, than Ohio State does.